The Memphis Grizzlies have been on a roll this season, both with and without Ja Morant, and they have been on such a roll that they are now neck and neck with the Utah Jazz for the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. Because this team has been so good and looked like a borderline dominant force against good and bad teams alike, a lot of people have started to wonder if this Memphis Grizzlies team could actually be put in the contender category. And I'm one of the people wondering that. So let's talk about the Memphis Grizzlies and whether or not they have actually reached the category of contender. Before I continue on with this video, about half of the people that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you've fallen at 50%, then please subscribe. Also drop a like on this video, it only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. I'm very close to 200K and I'm tired of it taking this entire fucking month to get there, so please subscribe. The Grizzlies currently have a 30-15 record, which puts them on a pace for a 55-win season, and that record would actually make them the 1st seed in the Eastern Conference so far, but they of course are in the West. Despite the fact that Memphis is closer to the East Coast than it is the West Coast, and being that the conferences are supposed to be about travel, that really doesn't make any sense. But whatever, moving on. The point is, they are absolutely killing it in the win column. They are also 7th in offensive rating, which is relatively close to where they were from the very beginning, but they are also now 8th in defensive rating. If you do not remember, in the first 15 to 20 or so games, the Memphis Grizzlies were the worst defense in the league, and they've crawled all the way back up to 8. I was relatively confident that they would not remain that bad defensively. It was pretty much an inevitability that they would improve because the defensive personnel, as well as that team's history, was just too good defensively in order for them to remain the worst in the league. But I can't say I expected them to recover all the way to the 8th best defense, which being that it was the first 15 to 20 games, you can only assume there have probably been a top 5 defense since then. So Memphis's defense is very, very good, along with their offense that was very good from the beginning. I'd have to chalk up the initial struggles to just having a new system with new personnel. Valanciunas as a big body in the paint was less of an available thing, as well as Jaren Jackson Jr. really struggling to open the year on both ends of the floor, and he's been pretty damn great since. But the team is top 10 in both offense and defense, and that is a pretty good sign for a contender level team. Now, they're not in the top 5, which is basically you're definitely a contender if you're top 5 in both category, but at the very least, they are breaching that territory. And when you see teams that are really more pretenders than contenders, in spite of the fact that they win a lot of games, you'll find that these good but not quite contender level teams very often are really good on one end of the floor and just getting a passing grade on the other. So that's not the case with the Grizzlies. They are great on both ends of the floor, and that is a huge difference maker. Another huge factor with this team is they are pretty much the textbook definition of next man up. A lot of people interpreted the Grizzlies' win streak without Ja Morant as the team is better without Ja, because of course no one who watches the NBA seems to approach things with an ounce of nuance. But really, the takeaway should have been, wow, the Memphis Grizzlies are really good and really deep even without Ja Morant. The Grizzlies were able to win because Tyus Jones stepped up in that starting role for Ja Morant. Desmond Bane as well as Jaren Jackson Jr. both played the best defense of their career over that stretch and averaged 18 and 19 points apiece. The team as a whole shot cosmically well from 3, and they just kind of pulled together, and they also had one of their weaker schedule stretches, so that definitely helped in their favor. Really, this run and the subsequent reaction is exactly why I had issues with the discourse around Ja Morant. And I think that's an important framing device, and it's going to sound like backtracking, but truly, the only reason a player ever becomes underrated or overrated is because of improper discourse. The reason why I believed Ja Morant was overrated in the past was the discourse suggested that he was carrying the Memphis Grizzlies, when that absolutely was not the case. He was one of 2 or 3 players that was pretty much in a similar tier for the first 2 years of his career, and people were acting as though it was like LeBron in 2018, and it was infuriating because it was disrespectful to the rest of the team. But now, both the Grizzlies roster has gotten better and Ja Morant has gotten substantially better. So we have the understanding now collectively that Ja Morant is very good and that the Memphis Grizzlies roster is very good. And now that we're on that footing, I'm pretty damn happy with it. The roster is better as a whole, Ja Morant is substantially better, and this team is kind of scary now. And real quick, let me just talk about one individual player that's not Ja Morant. Desmond Bane. Holy shit, thank you for making me look way smarter than I actually am. For those who do not know, because the video only got like 30,000 views, I made a video on the steal of the 2020 draft, and who guessed it, Desmond Bane was my pick to be the steal of the draft. He ended up going at pick number 30 to the Celtics, then getting traded to the Grizzlies, and in his second year in the NBA, he is averaging 17 points and 4.5 rebounds on 59% true shooting, and he is shooting 42% from 3 on 6.9 attempts per game. Nice. Very good shooter, finding ways to score outside of just shooting. Really, I expected what we're seeing out of Desmond Bane right now to come in his 5th, maybe to be generous 4th season, and the all-around aspects of his game outside of just shooting the ball were things that I would expect to take time to really come around the league. But no, the guy can make drives, the guy can create jump shots off of the dribble, he's actually a decent playmaker. His defense is really good. Desmond Bane is just all around fucking phenomenal. And him, along with Dylan Brooks and Jaren Jackson Jr., are kind of like these 3 players in a similar tier that just fit perfectly with what the Grizzlies want to do, especially around Ja Morant, especially. And really, you could kind of say the whole thing about this Grizzlies roster, where it's like, this is what I expected from you a few seasons from now. This whole team just feels ahead of schedule. Jaren Jackson Jr. being as dominant as he has been at center as of recently. All these role players being way better than we expected them to be. Desmond Bane, the biggest one among them. Really, the whole roster is ahead of schedule, especially being that they have the 2nd lowest average age in the entire league for a team. What's going on in Memphis is special, and they are getting comparisons to other early arrivals such as the OKC Thunder with KD, Harden, and Russ, for good reason. But that brings us to the contender question, a question that I have been asking more of late than I feel I have in any other season, because that particular area feels more open than it has ever been. Are the Memphis Grizzlies contenders? I would say yes. They're definitely in tier 2. As I've said a few times now, I have 2 tiers of contenders, the true top dogs, and then the yeah, I could definitely see it with them for sure teams, and that is tier 2. Which is where I'd put the Memphis Grizzlies. That puts them in the tier of the Chicago Bulls and Utah Jazzes of the world, and kind of the Miami Heat, because the Miami Heat continue to teeter on the line of 1 and 2 for me, because I feel like they're worse than all the other teams I'd put in 1, but I also feel like they're a clear step between the teams that I would put in 2. So I don't know, especially with Kyle Lowry, it makes it even closer to me putting them in tier 1, but I don't know, I can't definitively say. I don't know I'll ever be able to until they actually prove one way or the other. But I could see it with the... They're a team that I would not entirely shake my head if you said they were the team that won the championship this year. I would be a little taken aback, but it would not shock me like if you said it was, I don't know, the Wizards or something. So they're definitely in that tier. An element that makes me especially sure that they are in that tier is that Ja Morant continues time and time again to step up to the biggest challenges and exceed expectations against these top dog teams and top dog players. Look at how he's played against the Golden State Warriors. Ja Morant is like bordering on superstardom already. I realize Rudy is going to take issue with me not saying he's definitively that, but we just have different definitions of what a superstar is. But he's bordering on my definition, which is a very high standard of scrutiny. So Ja Morant is one of the biggest reasons why he'd be in this tier, but also, as I mentioned earlier, the Memphis Grizzlies roster is a lot better than given credit for, and it's finally starting to get that credit. So in a series versus the Warriors or the Suns, or if they made it out of the West, the Nets and the Bucks, and probably the Heat as well, I would pick those teams to win the series. But I also wouldn't feel like I was a certainty or that those teams are just going to get an absolute cakewalk. And that says a lot about how far this team has come in so little time. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, but that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.